Mass Effect was a great series of games. Knights of the Old Republic defined RPGs for many people. Dead Space made the gaming industry a bit more aware of how scary space is. These were all good games, and even something like No Man's Sky has done a decent job of attracting attention across PC and consoles to the genre. But let's be honest, space games and sci-fi as a whole have been leaving a lot to be desired lately, especially in the RPG area. We saw a cancelled Prey 2, a cancelled Star Wars 1313, a failed Anthem, and the list goes on. It's been rough, especially after seeing a multitude of heavyweights in the larger fantasy genre having a heyday just about every year of the last decade. It's not a bad thing. More good games is more good times for everybody, and fantasy is a pretty cool genre. But the smaller, more niche sci-fi genre, while making good progress, could use a bit of a boost. Starfield could be that boost. It's coming at the perfect time, and could lead to a reckoning across the industry for 4 main reasons. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. Before finding Star Citizen, a game I cover often, I was at a bit of a loss for what to pursue next in my thirst for more zero-G fun. This actually didn't make much sense since there wasn't much zero-G in Mass Effect, but let's go with that. In March of 2011, Mass Effect 3 came out and I played it like a madman. The conclusion of one of the best space operas in gaming was amazing to me, with a couple disappointments. But I needed more. I had always been hooked on games like KOTOR and Prey, and with 1313 being held on hold in Q2 of 2013 and Prey 2 being shelved in 2014, I was in need of a fix. And honestly, neither of those 2 games really met it anyways. But since then, we've seen a bit of a resurgence in the space game genre. While efforts were small, studios like Frontier and CIG were building space MMOs. Hard Space gave us a dedicated ship salvager, Outer Wilds was an amazing smaller title, and if you don't count Mass Effect Andromeda, Outer Worlds gave us our first major space-based RPG experience of the decade, in the last year of the decade. But I basically just named every major space-based experience you'd find on a space game list, not including things like 4X and real-time strategy games. And if you look at sci-fi RPGs, you'll find Final Fantasy listed as number 1. I mean, it's got the elements, but it's a bit of a stretch to call it science fiction in my opinion. Though there are some other experiences to be had in sci-fi. Cyberpunk 2077, The Ascent, Deus Ex, Horizon Zero Dawn, Fallout, and even some Star Wars games. And while these franchises gained plenty of attention, the space games I've been mentioning never really saw a major hit, like Skyrim, The Witcher 3, Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate, Greedfall, Bloodborne, Breath of the Wild, Monster Hunter, Souls games, Sekiro, Assassin's Creed, God of War, Tears of the Kingdom. You get the point. It's been bare compared to other genres, and despite all these other space games that are doing quite well on their own, the genre is in need of a major player to bring that hype mainstream again. It certainly doesn't need to be the best game out there, but an average game that opens the doors for the average gamer to learn more about what's even possible in space games now is kind of necessity. And what's possible in these games, as we've seen from Starfield previews, is a lot more than it used to be. We've been going to space for over half a century, and it's been such a common occurrence that only a small percentage of the population still got excited for it by the 2000s. And while there were many ongoing projects, the original excitement for space exploration in the late 20th century had died down for a while. It only took one firm shake to the industry as rocket launching technology was flipped on its head to change all that. Since SpaceX made a big name for itself in the US, we've been seeing the most launch activity since the 90s. Excitement for space exploration has never been higher. SpaceX has been running missions constantly with other companies like Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin also conducting launches alongside governments around the world. Space-based movies and TV shows have also exploded in recent years with new original ideas and older IPs being made new again. And of course, the incredible feat that is the James Webb Space Telescope is now orbiting Earth's L2 Lagrange point, looking back in time and delivering some unprecedented views into space we thought was empty. But that's only half the story. There have always been pretty obvious restrictions on space games. I mean, space is big. The things inside space also happen to be big. The attempts at building large areas to enjoy these games has proven difficult for developers in the past. Computer power has limited the creativity and scope of these projects and the ability for players to actually explore the planets in the game. What we've seen from Star Citizen to No Man's Sky, Elite Dangerous to Astroneer, not only are studios able to create much more convincing worlds and biomes, but they can now be rendered and loaded in much more easily. And we've figured out how to hide that loading to some extent. We've been able to watch how this has become possible by watching Star Citizen's development cycle. And while no two games are the same, we know that Bethesda is using a similar method of creation to generate its 1,000 planets to explore. While simply loading a map to walk around on and calling it a planet might not seem all that impressive, there is a ton that goes into the creation and organization of this kind of system. Now, like I said, it's not quite the same as Star Citizen, which goes much more in depth, but what the player sees is kind of what matters to most people. I have a few videos going over the whole process that I can link down below for you. But comparing what we're seeing with Starfield to something like Mass Effect Andromeda, which was shooting for a similar experience, tells me there's no denying the progress we've seen in gaming hardware, internet capabilities, and the tools provided in these game engines that alleviate some of the development strains a game like this may have encountered before. It's still not easy. It took a company like Bethesda 8 years to figure something like this out, but between the excitement of the public and these newfound possibilities in game development, it makes perfect sense for a AAA studio to take a shot at an opportunity like this in a way that hasn't been attempted at this scale yet. As I've made pretty clear throughout the video, there are quite a few interesting space-based games that already exist, but none of them really hit that single-player character-based space opera that Mass Effect nailed. Outer Worlds was great, but not the same caliber or scale. It was a good taste. And when you look at other options or even discussions found online, you'll find plenty of fans of this genre that have not had a central cause to rally behind in a while. No Man's Sky makes for great multiplayer. Elite Dangerous has truly blown the mind with its scale and exploration. Star Citizen manages to create incredibly detailed and interactive spaceships. FTL generates some amazing encounters you'd only find in space. X4 offers a less polished version of the true Space Voyager experience, and Space Engineers is exactly as the name implies. But overall, we haven't seen a game bring these aspects together in any major way quite like a big budget game might be able to for the more casual player. Starfield, from the makers of Skyrim and Morrowind, is at a level above these titles in terms of development efforts. This is a game that will entice space enthusiasts as much as RPG enthusiasts, fans of Bethesda, and your AAA gamer just looking for a new interesting take. There's a good chance for a game like Starfield to capitalize on the desires and hype that have drawn players to these games, to grab their attention and keep hold of it with Bethesda's deeper story and character development. The kicker is, the success of Starfield could be a boon for these games and the industry as a whole. That same phenomenon of players being drawn from less popular games will likely reverse itself as well. As players discover the possibilities of a game like Starfield, there's no doubt some players will look for a deeper experience that focuses more on a specific niche feature that have seen deeper growth and development in other games. While Cyberpunk 2077 didn't land completely on its feet, the game led to more focus on the genre. Games like Stray, The Ascent, Ghost Runner, Deus Ex, and Cloudpunk all likely saw increases in popularity from players looking for more cyberpunk experiences, if not only for a short time. No matter how players react to this game, there's no denying the healthy foundation that already exists in the genre to fuel Starfield and provide additional options for newcomers. What remains to be seen is if that foundation is good enough to keep players around after Starfield has faded away. I'm sure there have already been plenty of comments about how little people trust Bethesda Softworks now. Seriously, somebody tally them up down below. But hear me out. I'm not a lifelong Bethesda fan. I've played a few of the games, but I've only bought one copy of Skyrim. I skipped Fallout 76, and I'm actually not a huge fan of either of their two main franchises. That being said, I'm not inclined to write them off after a couple major bad launches. And that goes without saying, the messaging around this game is pointing more towards the older and more celebrated games of Bethesda. The games that focus more on the RPG aspects and the customizations of characters, like Morrowind. It is a new IP with a pretty hefty amount of work and effort put into setting a foundation for more games in the future. We've also seen talk from Todd Howard of a newly updated engine used for both Starfield and the next Elder Scrolls, but there's no knowing how big a difference it might actually be. Given other statements like the intense focus on bug fixing and QA work for this game, and the obvious lack of many other major titles from Bethesda landing very well in recent years, even on the publishing side, this game is looking more and more important for Bethesda every month. And finally, it's clear that Microsoft is putting a lot of focus on this title as well. The game may have been part of the main immediate benefits of acquisition, but it also gives Microsoft an easy step into the next genre of game series without developing an entirely new IP. Much like in 2006 with the original Mass Effect, Microsoft may have managed to lock in one of the biggest sci-fi series of the decade. Whether that is true or not is yet to be seen, but go back to E3 of 2021 when Microsoft and Bethesda made their debut side by side. Look at which game opens the show. Look at which game ends the show. Look at what games it is sharing those spotlights with, and look at how cleanly Starfield fits into the catalog of games going forward. In 2022, Starfield was presented as the one more thing focus of the show. And in 2023, it had an entire additional hour dedicated after the Microsoft Games Showcase. Say what you will about Bethesda, Xbox Game Studio seems to have settled on a golden child for the foreseeable future. Though we will see what comes of Fable eventually. Now, I'm not saying all is good and things are going to be great with the launch of Starfield. No more of that. This same exact scenario was possible with 2077 and its own genre, as we touched on. And while that game made a difference, with the better game, I think we'd have a bit of a different conversation in 2023 with just the first major DLC around the corner. No, this video isn't meant to be hype. It was heavy on hype. Sorry about that, but it's not a hype piece. It's just my summary of the reasons I think Starfield could be a big-time game, and why I believe the stage is pretty set for it to actually have a tangible impact on the gaming industry at large. AAA launches, especially with Bethesda, have not bolstered my confidence enough to be convinced this game will live up to the moment. So I'm cautious, optimistic, and interested in what might happen here. I also wouldn't mind an above-average space-based RPG, so there's that. This could be Elder Scrolls Skyrim in space, or it could just be another passing entertaining game that grips players for a year before the next big thing. I'll be following the game here and on my second channel where I've already hosted a couple podcast episodes on it. So if you're interested in more and want to keep up with the game, check back later or consider subscribing here. I hope you learned something new in this video, and I'll catch you in the next.